as a people, as pirates, and we are stealing back the truth.
Hi, I'm Alex Olson, a spoken word artist and political activist. Through my poetry, I aim to challenge social convention and spread truth about political and social injustice. If you have a message that must be heard or a change that you want to see in the world, make a 5-minute program and submit it to MiND. Don't let big corporations control the media. You have the power to make your opinions heard. Use your voice to steal back the truth. It's time to steal back the truth.
Two young men went to school and learned it was okay to hate. Because of them, my son is dead. I'm Judy Shepard. Isn't it time to teach our kids something new?
The people you're looking at in this cafe are risking their lives. They can be arrested, tortured, even killed. Many of them are homosexuals living under the fundamentalist regime in Iran.
My name is Mark Kleinwicks. I do peer counseling. For someone who came out I'm going to admit it, 1969, there was nowhere to go. And I think that also deals with the issue of why I'm even doing this. I had nowhere to go to sort of question what was going on in my mind, my body, and everything else. And I think for a lot of people, they need absolutely a place where they are not judged, where they feel comfortable, and that they know that they're not the only ones going through it. And surprisingly, a lot of people think on an initial call, whatever the reason is, that they're the only ones having this problem.
Sometimes many people feel isolated. They don't feel like they have community, they feel alone. I think for people within the community, we see the community as broad and supportive many times if we've been in it for a while, but we forget there's a lot of people who are very isolated in many aspects of their life. They may be isolated in family. They may be isolated at job. Many of the people who call us are actually married with children, and they don't know how to deal with the issues of coming out to their family, what that'll do to their family members. Some people are young. Coming out to their parents may mean losing a place to live. So it depends on the individual, but I think people deal with a variety of issues depending on what they're going through.
I think it's important to have LGBT counseling in particular because it's important to have a sense of community, and if you identify as LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, then this could potentially be a spot where you feel safe and at home and comfortable.
Simply by calling and connecting to another person that they see as gay or the same as them is very, very important in taking that first step and not feeling alone, feeling safe. They start sharing things which for them they've been afraid to share for a long time, and they start getting support for those feelings and feeling justified. Issues vary. They're pretty diverse, but I would say the majority of the clients, the issues revolve around coming out. If they're coming out for the first time or starting to deal with the issues of coming out, they feel more comfortable with somebody else who is gay or lesbian, bisexual, transgender. They feel a camaraderie, they feel safe. We have people who have actually have therapists, but do not discuss gay issues with their therapist because they don't feel comfortable for a variety of reasons. Either they think the therapist won't understand, or they just feel uncomfortable in sharing their feelings about those issues. I think growing up, a lot of people are made to feel uncomfortable about these issues, so it's very difficult.
Through our sessions, we help someone get to the point where they understand what they're looking for, what their issues are, and hopefully if they need long-term support, we get them the resources and referrals. The first thing you got to do is figure out within the first session why they're there. And hopefully you can get them to feel comfortable. Even if they don't call back the next time, if they end the call and saying, you know, I never thought of that, or I didn't think about that, and you know that you've gotten them to come to that conclusion as opposed to you just throwing advice out. That feels great.
It's important to have a safe, confidential space. Just to talk to someone objectively can really change your outlook, and to have someone who doesn't even know you say, it really seems like you're on the right track, or you're a really bright person, or you're a really nice person. You will find people. Having someone reassure that you're okay with it. Doesn't matter how strange you feel whenever you're out in your natural environment, but here you're okay, and it's important to have that type of space to feel more comfortable with yourself.
The fact that there is a place where absolutely you will have unconditional support is really the major thing. And as I said, when I first came out, I didn't know who to trust or who I could talk to. Fortunately, I did it at school, and I was in architectural school, so half of us were gay anyway. So there was great support when I came out, but you don't often get that, and especially in the 60s. And I think today, obviously, from the calls we get, it's still true.
I think the greatest injustice that LGBT people face is violence. Violence is consistently used as a tool of intimidation.
In 80 countries around the world, same-sex acts are criminalized in one way or another. Tragically, today it's far too common that LGBT folks around the world are routinely and brutally attacked, tortured, and even murdered.
There's a death penalty issue in many countries for just being gay or lesbian.
We serve as an organization that is dedicated to the ability of every LGBT person around the world to be able to stand up, to be able to chart their own way, and to be able to fight for the rights that they are entitled to.
This is an organization that gets things done. And at the end of the day, we know that we are going to get our rights. It's just going to be a very long struggle.
Our organization started 20 years ago, and it really was the brainchild of our founder, Julie Dorff.
We were really started by a bunch of ragtag street activists and immigrants who really came out of that era in the late 80s and early 90s of ACT UP and Queer Nation to fight for LGBT rights in the United States and out. Our mission was only as good as our relationships were with groups on the ground. And our biggest success in that first period certainly was getting our issues on the tables of the international human rights movement.
I think we've been involved in some of the major firsts in our community.
The very first asylum case based on sexual orientation was a lovely gay man from Brazil named Marcelo Tenorio. And Barney Frank, who was a big supporter early on, helped us connect with Janet Reno to ensure that that case would be elevated to a matter of precedent.
And hundreds of people have gotten asylum since then, and I feel very good about it. I walked into the WILMde Rising Gay bookstore a few years ago, and the man behind the counter came out and hugged me. He was Chinese, and he said, "I'm here because of you."
In 2001, the UN General Assembly had its very first meeting on HIV and AIDS. They had never discussed the issue before. And Igelherk had been invited on the first day of that meeting. The countries of the General Assembly had actually moved to ban me from speaking because I represented a gay group. Overnight, we actually mobilized a campaign to reverse that vote.
It would be wrong, it would be deadly and disastrous not to place human rights at the center of our responses to the HIV/AIDS pandemic.
I don't think we realized at the time how important some of the things we were doing. Whether it was Amnesty International or the United Nations or the State Department, we just made our strategic choice and went for it. We were young.
Julie created an institution that's continued today, that's stronger than it's ever been, that moves us forward as an international movement.
I ask for your forgiveness in the way in which we, the institutional church, have often treated you.
I think what we're called upon to do as we go into our next 20 years is to help our partner organizations throughout the world to have greater voice, to be able to function as effective, empowered partners in a larger human rights movement.
We need the support of everyone, and we want people to understand supporting the International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission is supporting the route to our rights worldwide.
Igelherk is front and center, working on the ground, hand in hand with local activists, the way really no other organization is doing.
Igelherk's international network means that they're the connective link between those of us in government who want to help and the people overseas. It's absolutely essential, and if they weren't there, it's a function that wouldn't get done.
Igelherk works for the day when all human beings are valued and treated with dignity and respect. We work for the day when justice is a reality around the world for everyone.
Human rights.
Human rights for everyone.
For everyone.
Para todo el mundo.
Everywhere.
Are you an indie artist looking to showcase your work, to teach people about what you do, no matter what art form or style you can make programs and share your work with the world. Check out MiND.TV.org to learn more. I'm Melissa Ferrick, and you're watching MiND TV.
Giovanni's Room was like the perfect coming together of my interests and abilities. That I had been a college teacher for like 7 years, and in those days I knew that I did not want to continue in an academic career because I would have been, as far as I could see into the future, I would have had to have been in the closet. I either had to stop doing gay stuff in order to get a career together, or I had to find out how to make gay into a career. And at the time, I was the treasurer for the first gay community center down on Cater Street, and the board we had a retreat. And on that retreat, one of the other board members, Arlene Olshan, and I, both of us wanted to change what we were doing, and both of us were interested in Giovanni's Room, which had been for sale for $500 for 6 months. In 1976 was a time when there were finally starting to be enough books published that it was conceivable to make a profit, to support people. Up until that time, the first 3 years, it was 100% volunteer. And so we started off with Arlene getting paid by the store, and then 6 months later, we were far enough into it that I could quit my job and start working for Giovanni's Room. Well, the three guys that founded the store in 1973, they wanted to name it after a book. But those three guys that founded the store, naming it for James Baldwin's novel, was a way of them expressing, it's not about white gay men. That's not what this store is about. Giovanni's Room, on the other hand, was a code word. Every homosexual, male and female, knew what Giovanni's Room was because there were so few gay novels. And now, of course, most people don't know what it is. Many people think my name is Giovanni. When I was growing up, my father was a professor at Rice University in Houston, and so I had access to a really first-class library. But in the 1950s, there really wasn't anything to read. There were a couple of psychiatric texts that explained clearly and profoundly that homosexuality is caused by, or at least among males, is caused by an overwhelming mother and a distant father. And that was really it for what there was to read. So at least for my generation, I think for younger generations too, finding out about yourself through reading is a fundamental way of understanding yourself. Straight people basically don't come in here, which I find curious because people are curious about other people who are not exactly like themselves. But I think that straight people are afraid to come in here because they might see something that would embarrass them. We can't be limited by what straight people think of us, and we just have to go on, and we're going to educate them in the end. They are going to finally realize that we are, in many, many, many ways, exactly like them, and that we are as varied as they are, and we're as interesting as they are. The very act of coming in here, a lot of people have said, changed their lives. Because crossing our threshold means that those folks who are coming in here for the first time are saying to themselves, I'm interested in what I know is in that store. You know, a lot of people have said, you know, I walked around the block for 2 years before I finally got the nerve, because everybody's sure that both the cops are out there filming and their mother is standing directly across the street. So it's an act of courage, for people who, were trying to, find out who they are, to come in here and find out who they are. That's the, we can help people once they get inside, but they have helped themselves the most just by coming in here. That's That's the big step.
Why had I told my parents? I hadn't even had sex with anyone yet. Conversely, according to my mother, my father had been having sex with men for years and not telling anyone. The line that Dad drew between reality and fiction was indeed a blurry one. To understand this, one had only to enter his library. For anyone but the landed gentry to refer to a room in their house as the library might seem affected. But there really was no other word for it. And if my father liked to imagine himself as a 19th century aristocrat overseeing his estate from behind the leather-topped mahogany and brass Second Empire desk, did that require such a leap of the imagination? Perhaps affectation can be so thoroughgoing, so authentic in its details, that it stops being pretense and becomes, for all practical purposes, real. Over the years, my mother has given away or sold most of Dad's library. She began immediately after the funeral, asking my girlfriend to choose a book. Out of the hundreds of volumes on the shelves, I don't think Joan could have made a better choice. It's about the crucifixion. In many ways, my mother's Catholicism was more form than content. But sacrifice was a principle that she grasped instinctively. Perhaps she also liked the poem because its juxtaposition of catastrophe with a plush domestic interior is life with my father in a nutshell. Dad's death was not a new catastrophe, but an old one that had been unfolding very slowly for a long time. The idea that I caused his death by telling my parents I was a lesbian is perhaps illogical. Causality implies connection, contact of some kind, and however convincing they might be, you can't lay hands on a fictional character. There's a scene in The Great Gatsby where a drunken party guest is carried away by the discovery that the volumes in Gatsby's library are not cardboard fakes. "What thoroughness, what realism," he exclaims. Knew when to stop, too, didn't cut the pages. My father's books, the hardbound ones with their ragged dust jackets, the paperbacks with their creased spines, had clearly been read. But in a way, Gatsby's pristine books and my father's worn ones signify the same thing, the preference of a fiction to reality. If Fitzgerald's own life hadn't turned from fairy tale to tragedy, would his stories of disenchantment have resonated so deeply with my father? Gatsby in the pool, Zelda in the asylum, Scott in Hollywood, an alcoholic, dying of a heart attack at 44. My father was 44 when he died, too. Struck by the coincidence, I counted out their lifespans. The exact same number of months and weeks, but Fitzgerald lived 3 days longer. For a wild moment, I entertained the idea that my father had timed his death with this in mind, as some sort of deranged tribute. But that would only confirm that his death was not my fault. that in fact it had nothing to do with me at all. And I'm reluctant to let go of that last tenuous bond.
Hi, I'm Michelle Wu. You're watching MiND, the only station bringing you programming made for you, by you, representing your community and telling your stories. Become a member and get your voice heard. Don't wait. Show your support for MiND today.